Hello everyone. Today I propose to discuss the reliability of the Kia Sportage 5th generation. Which engine and gearbox is better to avoid on the secondary market, and which ones, on the contrary, are worth your attention. In this video, we will analyze the reliability of all engines and gearboxes. In addition, we will examine the reliability of the car's chassis, the reliability of its electrical components. We will figure out how things stand with the body, the quality of the paintwork, and the wear resistance of the interior. Well, let's start with the 1.6-liter engine producing 180 horsepower. This is the turbocharged Hyundai G4FP, or Smartstream 1.6 T-GDi engine, which has been assembled since 2019. Overall, this engine has proven itself very well. There are practically no mass problems with it. This turbo engine is distinguished by the presence of a new variable valve timing system called CVVD, and to everyone's surprise, this system causes no complaints whatsoever. The factory service life of the unit is estimated at approximately 240,000 kilometers of mileage, provided the maintenance schedule is followed. It is worth taking into account that small displacement turbocharged engines are more demanding of fuel and oil quality than their naturally aspirated counterparts. Timely oil changes every 7,000 to 8,000 kilometers and the use of high-octane gasoline make it possible to significantly extend the service life of the piston group and the turbocharger assembly. The engine does not like cold operation and short trips without warming up. To preserve the resource of the CVVD, it is recommended to avoid aggressive loads on cold oil. The timing chain has a tendency to stretch at mileages of 160 to 180,000 kilometers, which increases the risk of it jumping over a tooth of the sprocket, and that is fraught with the valves being bent by the pistons. Mechanics also draw attention to the importance of a high-quality air filter to protect the turbine blades from dust and foreign particles. The engine, in order to reduce weight, is made of aluminum, while the cylinder block has an open cooling jacket and is equipped with thin-walled cast iron liners that, after 140 to 160,000 kilometers, rapidly lose their shape and stretch into an ellipse, after which progressive oil consumption almost immediately sets in. And it is also worth noting that owners highly praise this engine for its dynamic characteristics. They note high elasticity. The engine pulls confidently from low revs, which makes city driving comfortable. With a calm driving style on the highway, it is possible to achieve consumption figures of about 5 5/10 to 6 liters per 100 kilometers, which is an excellent result for a 180 horsepower unit. Further along the course, we will examine the 2.0 engine of the same Smartstream series. It has one peculiarity: 2 fuel injectors are installed per cylinder. The design also provides for hydraulic compensators that automatically adjust the thermal clearances of the valves. According to auto mechanics, the power unit under review is considered quite simple in design and construction. But there are also downsides here. Some car owners note moderate oil consumption by the engine after 50 to 60,000 kilometers of mileage. According to auto mechanics, the stock timing chain of the engine in question can stretch already by 150 to 170,000 kilometers of mileage, after which a friendly meeting of the pistons with the valves will occur. A potentially weak point of the South Korean engine is considered to be the innovative electronically controlled thermostat of the cooling system, which on some car owners failed at childish mileages of 40 to 70,000 kilometers. The main bearings of the crankshaft with which the power unit in question is equipped are coated with a special polymer layer that is supposed to protect them from accelerated wear. However, in reality, the polymer coating did not play any special role in protection. To date, dozens of cases of connecting rod bearing rotation have already been recorded worldwide on the South Korean engine at mileages of 90 to 120,000 kilometers. It seems that a design miscalculation is to blame for everything. It is possible that the next modernization of the engine will correct this problem. Another problem is the variable displacement oil pump. According to car owners' reviews, it does not stand out for durability. Several dozen cases of its failure at low mileages of 50 to 80,000 kilometers have been noted. The approximate resource of this unit is 350,000 kilometers. In general terms, the engine is not bad, but it has its own peculiarities that should be taken into account, especially if you are buying a used car. Well, we move on and turn to the diesel engines. The 1.6 CRDi has been produced since 2017. This engine from the Smartstream family is reliable but quite demanding. The main problems are related to the environmental systems, such as the particulate filter, the EGR valve, and AdBlue, which is nothing unique for virtually all diesel engines without exception. The engine has a toothed oil pump belt. Its breakage, just like the breakage of the timing belt, is fatal. It is recommended to replace both kits preventively at a mileage of about 90,000 to 100,000 kilometers. The common rail injection system is very sensitive to the quality of diesel fuel, because of which the piezoelectric injectors can suffer. Due to the design features of the intercooler pipe, condensate can accumulate in it. In severe frosts, it freezes, because of which the car will not start. Otherwise, this is an excellent unit that serves its owner faithfully for at least 300,000 kilometers. And finally, the turn has come for the most reliable engine that is installed on the Kia Sportage 5th generation. This is the 2.0 CRDi producing 186 horsepower, which auto mechanics call extremely reliable. Breakdowns here are extremely rare and for the most part are due to improper operation. A serious plus was the replacement of the cast iron block with an aluminum one. The engine became lighter and fuel consumption noticeably decreased. In addition, there is a reinforced timing belt here, which, unlike many modern engines, does not lead to a meeting of the pistons with the valves when it brakes. The engine has excellent traction already from low revs, and at the same time remains quite economical. Real consumption in the mixed cycle stays in the region of 6 5/10 liters. Hydraulic compensators relieve the owner of the need to adjust thermal clearances. However, it was not without drawbacks. The most noticeable problem is increased oil consumption, which begins practically from the first kilometers of mileage. Owners also complain about a rather rapid drop in the coolant level. At high mileages after 100 to 120,000 kilometers, the maintenance of the exhaust neutralization system with AdBlue injection begins to become noticeably more expensive. Next, the gasoline engine G4KN 2.5 GDi. This is a modern, naturally aspirated Smartstream with a combined injection system that replaced the old 2.4-liter engines. On the one hand, the engineers tried to correct the known ailments of previous generations. They added a second row of MPi injectors, installed oil jets for cooling the pistons, and made the timing chain more durable. The engine turned out to be quite torquey at low revs thanks to the long-stroke design, and at the same time demonstrates decent economy, especially on the highway. Fast warm-up can also be recorded as a plus. However, in practice, the engine received a whole series of serious shortcomings. The most noticeable problem is increased oil consumption, which many owners note already from the first thousands of kilometers. An even more dangerous feature is the extremely close location of the catalyst to the cylinder head. When it is destroyed, ceramic particles enter the cylinders and cause scoring. Additionally, owners encounter a rather rapid failure of the electronic water pump and problems with the oil pump. The GDi injectors also turned out to be capricious and require high-quality gasoline, preferably 95+. The G4KN is a rather contradictory engine. On the one hand, it is modern, torquey, and relatively economical. On the other, it has several serious design weak points: oil consumption, risk of scoring, unreliable thermostat, and pump that have already manifested themselves in many owners. And for dessert, the most interesting part, the hybrids. The hybrid engine G4FT 1.6 T-GDi is a modern turbocharged gasoline engine with a hybrid superstructure that the Hyundai-Kia concern actively uses on the Tucson, Sorento, Santa Fe crossovers, and on our hero, the Sportage. From a design point of view, the engine turned out to be quite well thought out. There is a variable oil pump, an electronic thermostat, and improved phase shifters. The hybrid part is implemented quite simply and reliably. As a result, a car with such a power unit demonstrates a very pleasant fuel consumption of about 5 to 5.5 liters in the mixed cycle, and at the same time possesses good dynamics, especially in the HV and PHV versions. However, it was not without weak points either. The main chronic problem is progressive oil consumption after 150,000 kilometers, caused by deformation of the steel liners. In addition, the timing chain here stretches already by 130 to 150,000 kilometers, and when it breaks, the engine receives serious damage. It bends the valves. Another point is the absence of hydraulic compensators, so owners have to periodically adjust the valves manually. In the end, it can still be said that the G4FT is a rather successful modern hybrid with excellent economy and pleasant dynamics. With regular and high-quality maintenance, it is capable of covering 300,000+ kilometers. However, it requires a more attentive attitude than naturally aspirated engines. It is necessary to monitor the oil level, the condition of the timing chain, and not allow overheating. I think it is worth adding a few more words about the 13.8 kilowatt-hour battery, and so far it is showing itself to be quite reliable. At mileages of up to 80 to 100,000 kilometers, the capacity loss is usually within 5 to 10%. The battery is liquid-cooled, and that is a big plus. So in general, the main problem of this hybrid is not the battery, but the gasoline engine itself. Well, we drive on. And before talking about the chassis, electrics, brakes, and body, we will examine the problems with the gearboxes. And in this generation of the Kia Sportage, there are many types of them. But let's start with the 6-speed manual. The M6CF4 has been assembled since 2010 and is installed on almost the entire model range of the concern, with engines up to 275 Newton-meters of torque. This is an old and proven gearbox, but it has its own shortcomings that one can learn to live with. For example, owners often complain about stiff engagement of first or reverse gear. The cause may be wear of the third and fourth gear synchronizer sleeve or the clutch, a rarer problem in which fifth gear can spontaneously jump out when driving at high speed, for example, 120 kilometers per hour, usually associated with wear of the blocking rings. And among the most frequent problems are leaks through the drive or input shaft seals. Now, I propose to talk about the 7-speed robot. The D7UF1 or Sportage 7 DCT has been produced by the concern since 2015 and is installed on all models of the company with the 1.6 T-GDi turbo engine, as well as with the 1.6 and 1.7 CRDi diesels. A dry dual-clutch robot is, on the one hand, quite fast and economical. On the other, it has characteristic ailments, a relatively low clutch resource, and frequent complaints about jerky operation. The first problems usually begin already at 20 to 40,000 kilometers, in the form of vibrations when starting off and shifting. The mechanical part of the gearbox itself is durable, 250 to 300,000 kilometers, but the clutches, flywheel, and actuator fail noticeably earlier. Repair turns out to be expensive. Replacing the clutch with the flywheel and actuator easily goes beyond 1,000 euros. At the same time, the gearbox requires high quality and timely maintenance, especially oil changes. Summing up briefly, it can be said that the D7UF1 is not the most reliable robot in the Hyundai/Kia lineup. If the car has such a robot and a mileage already more than 80,000 kilometers, before buying, be sure to perform a thorough diagnosis of the clutches and actuator. With careful operation and timely maintenance, the gearbox can last quite a long time, but one should not relax with it. Now we move on to the automatic gearboxes. There are 3 of them in the Kia Sportage lineup: the 6-speed automatic A6MF1, the A6MF2, and the 8-speed automatic A8MF1. The A6MF1 has been produced since 2009 and is installed on many models of the concern. On SsangYong brand cars, such an automatic transmission is installed under its own index, 6F24. From this one can already conclude that this gearbox has no problems with spare parts and repair. But weak points still exist. Dirty oil wears out the aluminum channels of the valve body. The valves begin to stick, which causes strong jolts kicks when shifting gears, most often when shifting from first to second or from second to third. Due to aggressive driving, the splines on the pump hub are often sheared, or the bearings are destroyed, which leads to metallic noise and expensive repair. The speed sensors and internal wiring are sensitive to overheating and metal shavings. When they fail, the gearbox can fall into emergency mode. Only one gear remains. The speed sensors and internal wiring are sensitive to overheating and metal shavings. When they fail, the gearbox can fall into emergency mode. Only one gear remains. As you can see, with the A6 MF1, all problems begin when drivers use the car's capabilities to the full. But with such an approach, several recommendations must be followed. For example, avoid sharp floor starts and slipping in mud or snow so as not to shear the splines of the mechanical parts. And at the first signs of jerking, do not delay a trip to the service so as to flush the valve body in time and replace the worn solenoids. It should be understood that the A6 MF1 is afraid of overheating. Installing an additional cooling radiator significantly reduces the risk of breakdown. The A6 MF2 is a 6-speed torque converter automatic from Hyundai/Kia that was produced from 2009 to 2018. Compared with many other Korean automatics of that time, it is considered quite reliable and successful. The main problems are related to the valve body solenoids and valves, which over time begins to give jolts and kicks, especially on a warmed-up gearbox. There is also the unscrewing of the hub bolts on early versions before 2012. With timely maintenance, the mechanical part of the gearbox is capable of covering 250 to 300,000 kilometers. The most important thing for this automatic transmission is regular oil changes every 40,000 kilometers with the filter. With such an approach, the gearbox shows itself from a good side and does not cause serious problems up to high mileages. The A6 MF2 is one of the most reliable automatic gearboxes of Hyundai/Kia of the 2010s. With normal maintenance, it is quite capable of lasting 250,000+ kilometers without a major overhaul. The main thing is not to ignore the first signs of valve body malfunction and to change the oil in time. The A8 MF1 is an 8-speed automatic of the new generation that Hyundai/Kia install on modern Tucson, Sportage, Sorento, and Santa Fe. The gearbox is more modern and economical compared with the previous 6-speed automatics. So far, the gearbox is considered quite reliable, but it has typical weak points for modern automatics: sensitivity to the quality and timely replacement of oil, a tendency to overheat, and problems with the valve body at high mileages. The most frequent complaints of owners are jolts when shifting, delays, and transition to emergency mode. With regular maintenance oil change every 40 to 60,000 kilometers, the gearbox is capable of lasting 200 to 250,000 kilometers without serious investments. This is a modern and overall reliable automatic. The main rule for it is not to skimp on oil and not to allow overheating. If the car is operated in harsh conditions, city plus traffic jams plus heat, it is desirable to install an additional automatic transmission cooling radiator. And so the time has come to tell you about the suspension of the Kia Sportage 5th generation. At the front, there is a classic MacPherson strut. At the rear, a multi-link suspension. Overall, the design is modern and quite reliable. But, as with any new model, there are its own nuances. Let's start with the most frequent complaint that is encountered among owners. This is the early failure of the rear shock absorbers. There are cases when the rear suspension is punched through, already at mileages from 500 to 10 to 15,000 kilometers. The car begins to rock strongly. The rear jumps on bumps, especially if there are passengers or luggage in the cabin. Some owners write directly that they felt unsafe on the highway. So far, this is not a mass story, but such reviews appear regularly, especially on cars of 2022 to 2023 years of manufacture. Some associate this with a possible factory defect. The second most popular topic is extraneous sounds. Many complain about knocks or squeaks when driving over uneven surfaces, speed bumps, or in turns. Most often the culprits are stabilizer struts and bushings, ball joints, or control arm silent blocks. Separately, it is worth saying about the character of the suspension itself. Many owners note that the Sportage 5th generation turned out to be rather stiff. This is especially noticeable on 19-inch wheels. On good asphalt, excellent handling and stability. But on broken roads and potholes, the suspension transmits impacts into the cabin rather harshly. There are also opposite reviews. Some say that the rear part is too soft and rocks in turns. Here, everything is already subjective and depends on what you drove before. Critical mass failures of the suspension on the Sportage 5th generation have not yet been recorded. There are no mass recall campaigns for the chassis, no stories about torn-off control arms or destroyed beams. The majority of owners at mileages of up to 100,000 kilometers do not complain about the suspension at all. The problems are of a point nature: electrics and electronics. The model received a large curved screen, a bunch of assistants, and modern electronics. But along with this, owners have questions. Does the multimedia glitch? Does the battery drain quickly? And how reliable is all this electronics? Let's figure it out. The Sportage 5th generation is one of the most digital models in the class. Here there is a large touchscreen, a digital instrument panel, a bunch of cameras and radars. On the one hand, it is convenient. On the other, the more electronics, the more potential points of failure. The good news, there are few serious hardware failures. Most of the problems are software related. The most frequent complaint of owners is glitches of the multimedia system. Many complain that the screen periodically freezes, lags, or goes out completely. This is especially evident when using Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. The connection often breaks. There are also problems with navigation, slow menu operation, and the need to constantly reboot the system by holding the power button for 15 to 20 seconds. In cold weather, some owners note that the screen responds worse. Most of these problems are solved by updating the software at the dealer or via wireless updates. The second most popular topic is the discharge of the 12-volt battery. Many owners write that if the car stands 5 to 7 days without movement, the battery can go flat. This is especially noticeable on cars with a large number of electronic options and connected Kia Connect services. This is a rather typical situation for modern cars with a large number of always-on modules. The solution is either to drive more often, or to install a higher capacity battery, or disable some background functions. The third group of complaints concerns the electronic assistance: false activations of the collision prevention system, sharp steering interventions of the lane keeping system, problems with the camera and radar after windshield replacement. Sometimes the system requires recalibration. This is not a cheap procedure, and it must be done at an official dealer or in a service with the necessary equipment. The model is new, so Kia actively releases software updates. Many early glitches have already been fixed. However, if you frequently use all the electronic assistance and wireless connectivity, be prepared for periodic minor irritations. The body of the Kia Sportage 5th generation. Let's start with the most frequent remark: the quality of the paint. The Sportage 5th generation has a rather thin paint coating. Owners often complain that chips quickly appear on the hood, front bumper, and fenders. This is especially noticeable after driving on the highway. Many note that already after the first winter or 10 to 15,000 kilometers, quite a few bugs appear on the front part. This is a rather typical situation for many modern Korean cars. The paint here is not the thickest and not the most resistant to small stones. A separate story is the chrome. On the Sportage 5th generation, quite a lot of chrome parts are used: the radiator grille, door moldings, handles, window trim. Owners complain that over time the chrome loses its shine, becomes cloudy, and in some cases begins to peel or blister. This is especially noticeable on the lower door moldings and on the grille. In regions where reagents are used in winter, the process accelerates. This is not a mass phenomenon, but such complaints appear regularly, especially on cars of 2022 to 2023 years. With rust on the fifth Sportage, everything is still relatively calm so far. The windshield on the Sportage 5th generation is rather delicate. Many owners write that it easily collects chips and cracks even from small stones. This is characteristic of many modern cars with acoustic glass. There are also complaints about problems with the seals. In some cases, water can enter the cabin through the door or sunroof seals if present. This is especially noticeable during heavy rain or high-pressure washing. The assembly is overall at the level of its class, but of course it is far from the premium segment. The body of the Kia Sportage 5th generation is overall strong, but has typical weak points for modern Korean crossovers: thin paint, vulnerable chrome, and a tendency of the windshield to chip. The interior of the Sportage 5th generation looks modern and rather premium for its class. A lot of soft plastic, pleasant to the touch materials, a large digital panel. However, according to owners' reviews, the wear resistance of the materials is average. Already after 2 to 3 years of active operation, the first signs of wear begin to appear, especially if the car is used daily and there is a driver in the family who spends a lot of time behind the wheel. One of the most frequent complaints is wear of the steering wheel. The leather or eco-leather on the steering wheel wears through rather quickly and begins to peel, especially in the places where the driver holds his hands. On many owners already by 40 to 60,000 kilometers, the steering wheel looks worn. The top layer is rubbed off, smooth zones and small cracks appear. The steering wheel wears especially quickly for those who wear rings. This is a rather typical ailment not only of the Sportage but of many other Kia and Hyundai models of recent years. The next important point is the driver's seat. The side bolster on the driver's side suffers the most. The fabric or eco-leather wears through. A noticeable scuff appears, and in some cases it even wears through to holes. This is especially noticeable on cars with a mileage from 50,000 kilometers. Owners also note that over time the seat can sag a little, and the stitching on the seams begins to come apart. The passenger seats wear significantly more slowly. If the interior has light upholstery, it gets dirty faster and looks worse after a couple of years. Summing up, one can safely say that the Kia Sportage 5th generation is a reliable and practical car by modern standards. Remember that everything that was said in this video is not a rule, but weak points that need to be looked at when buying on the secondary market. In the opinion of the editorial staff of the CarMe Point Pro website, the most reliable option will be the purchase of the 2-liter diesel engine. In the other options, there will be nuances. Well, that is all from me. Thank you very much for watching to the end. If you are the owner of a Kia Sportage, it would be great if you shared your vision of the problems. This would greatly help people who are planning to buy this used car.